With 6 teams on bye, this might be a week where you're going out to the waiver wire and finding some players you can actually start in your fantasy lineup. I've got 8 players you can consider starting this week that have secret upside that could help you win. Hey, before I get to those players, I'm going to remind you, if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy yet, now is the perfect time because they're going to give all new customers this Patrick Mahomes special on Sunday night. Just needs to go higher than half a yard. You take that line, pair it with any other line or lines you like, and you could potentially 20x your entry. And if you join Underdog using our promo code ENDGAME, not only are you going to get this new customer special, but they're also going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Go to Underdog, use promo code ENDGAME, take the Mahomes special, and potentially 20x your money. As I said, with 6 teams on bye, this is a rough week, and it is definitely a rough week to be streaming running backs. The obvious pick here is Zach Moss replacing Jonathan Taylor, who's out with that thumb injury. But come on, I don't think people look at this guy as a deep, kind of sneaky start. He's ranked very highly on most sites. So let's go a little bit deeper with Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders. In the 3 games where Washington has lost big, that was Buffalo week 3, Chicago week 5, and of course Dallas last week, Antonio Gibson has played 61%, 54%, and 48% of the snaps. And remember last week, even though he only played 48% of the snaps, he was a true game time decision with an injury. We likely would have seen more Antonio Gibson last week had he been healthy. This is certainly a game where you should be projecting the Commanders to be down big against this Miami offense. This Commanders defense has only gotten even worse than they were early in the season since they traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young. And you got to think this Miami offense is going to have no problem putting up tons of points against this Commanders defense. Why I really like Gibson so much this week isn't necessarily for what he's going to do on the ground. He's probably not going to get a ton of carries, but when the Commanders are getting absolutely blown out, he is the pass catching back. In fact, over the last 4 games, he's had at least 4 targets, and prior to last week, where again, he was limited with that injury, he had gone 3 straight games with 5 catches. In this game, we could project him playing a big snap share over 50%, maybe close to 60%, and getting something similar to what we got in that Chicago game, where he was out there getting a ton of targets, getting a ton of catches. So if you're in a PPR league, I think Antonio Gibson has plenty of upside in week 13. Now, when Michael Carter hit waivers a couple weeks ago and was picked up by the Arizona Cardinals, not many people paid attention to that, but I think you need to start paying attention because his usage is starting to grow, and we're starting to see kind of how they envision him in this offense. Last week, he played 38% of the snaps. No, that's not a lot, but James Conner only played 42% of the snaps. He only had 2 less carries than James Conner, 1 less target, and they caught the same amount of passes. This Cardinals team is playing for the future. Michael Carter is still a young, talented back. We've seen him be productive in the NFL. They may want to get a look at this guy more and more as the season goes on. And as he gets more used to this offense, he's going to see that snap share increase. I could see him getting closer to a 50% snap share this week. We know he's a talented pass catcher, and this isn't a terrible matchup against this Steelers defense. They're slightly below average against the run, but what you got to really like is stud linebacker Quan Alexander is out. That should open things up for him in the passing game. Michael Carter, definitely somebody to keep your eye on, but I also think somebody you could potentially start this week in very deep PPR leagues. Again, not a guy you want to start in a non-PPR, but thanks to his pass catching and the matchup, I think he's worth a start in very deep PPR leagues. All right, thankfully it's not as rough at the wide receiver position. There's a couple guys I really like this week. There's a few, but I'm going to talk about a couple I haven't talked about in a while. Let's start with Curtis Samuel. I think Curtis Samuel is one of the best streaming options you can get this week. He actually leads this Commanders offense in targets per route run when all 3 wide receivers are on the field together. Last week, 12 targets, 9 catches, 100 yards. And he gets a good matchup against this Miami secondary because when you look at it, you got Jalen Ramsey on one side, Xavier Howard on the other. Over the middle, out of the slot is kind of the best way to attack this defense, and that's primarily where Curtis Samuel lines up. And again, we've got to project this as a game where the Commanders are going to be playing from behind, not able to run the ball. We're probably going to see Sam Howell attempt 40 to 50 passes again, and I think that's a good thing for Curtis Samuel. He's out there on most waiver wire right now. If you need a wide receiver 3, a flex type, I think Curtis Samuel has a lot of upside in this game. A game where the Commanders are probably going to be throwing a lot, playing from behind. Go take a look, see if Curtis Samuel is out there. He's one of my favorite streamers in week 13. Now, a guy that may not be as available, but I do also like this week that I've talked about a few times is Rashee Rice. This guy, every time it seems like he takes a step forward, he takes 2 steps back. But I was very encouraged by what we saw in week 12. And not just the production. I'm encouraged by the usage. He ran a route on 71% of Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks, which is by far his season high, and he had a 31% target share, which was also a season high. This team needs another playmaker outside of Travis Kelce. Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, they're just not it. They need another guy, and Rashee Rice might be that guy. We often see rookies get better as the season goes on. I think we see Rice get more and more involved. Now, it's not the best matchup on paper against the Green Bay Packers, but this secondary is very beat up. They have not been as good down the stretch as they were earlier in the year. I think there's still chances here for Rashee Rice. We know he has touchdown upside. The downside here is, unlike Curtis Samuel, Rashee Rice may not be available in a lot of leagues, but if he is out there in your league or if he's sitting on your bench, I think he's a good start in Week 13. All right, let's move on to quarterback, and I like Russell Wilson this week. It's been a weird year for Russell Wilson. He's playing well, putting up good numbers, but not throwing for a lot of yards. He's throwing for touchdowns, but he's also kind of running the ball. He's had at least 2 touchdowns in 6 games this year, and he's had at least 30 rushing yards in 6 games this year. And now he goes on the road into Houston to face this Houston offense with CJ Stroud that has just been rolling. You got to think this Houston offense, they're going to put up points. They're going to force the Broncos to score. This isn't going to be a game like we've seen recently where the Broncos are playing ahead, probably. And that means Russell Wilson is going to have to do the heavy lifting because this run game is not very strong. So I think this could be another game where Russell Wilson doesn't necessarily put up a ton of yards, but he gives you a couple touchdowns, runs for 30-plus yards. And look, when you're looking at a streaming quarterback, you'll take that. Not to mention, it's not a terrible spot for Russell Wilson. Houston allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the quarterback, so this is a good spot for him in a game where they're going to probably have to rely on the passing game more than they'd like to keep pace with this Houston offense. Now, Jordan Love's been a tough guy to figure out week to week. Started the season, looked like that guy. Then in the middle part of the season, looked like he maybe wasn't even going to be a starter in the NFL going forward. But he's bounced back big time over the last 3 games. He's looked great in that matchup on the road against Detroit. Now, he does get a tough matchup this week in Week 13 against the Chiefs. They are still a very strong secondary, a very strong defense, but he's at home. He's been playing well. I actually like Russell Wilson more. I think the matchup is better for him. I feel safer about Russell Wilson, but it's hard to ignore how good Jordan Love has been the last few games. So if Russell Wilson was picked up, you're looking for a streamer. Jordan Love might still be out there because, again, he was dropped early in the year when he started playing bad. He may still be out there. And here, we're just going to bank on the fact that he keeps rolling and keeps playing well. And look, if Christian Watson keeps getting involved, Jaden Reed is healthy, these pass catchers, maybe it doesn't matter so much the matchup. At home, maybe he still comes through. All right, let's finish up with tight end. And Logan Thomas is a guy I've mentioned on here a few times, and I'm going to mention him again. He's always one of those tight ends I feel like is a good streaming option when he's in plus matchups. And this is a plus matchup. I talked about it a little bit with Curtis Samuel. You got 2 strong corners on the outside. That should open things up for the slot receiver, the tight end over the middle. And Logan Thomas, we know he's involved in this offense, and he's also a big red zone threat. He has the 5th most targets among tight ends inside the 10-yard line. So he always has a chance to score, which is a huge plus when you're streaming a tight end. And again, talked about it. This is a game where the Commanders are probably going to be getting blown out. They're going to throw the ball 40-plus times. There's going to be opportunities here for the pass catchers, and I think the ones that benefit are Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas. So if you're streaming tight end this week, it's rough out there. There's not a lot available, but Logan Thomas, still widely out there in most leagues. Go ahead, give him a stream. And then if you need to go a little deeper, I think you can give Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints a stream. He was kind of a pre-draft sleeper, kind of liked him, and then did not do anything to start the season, and then got hurt and was dropped almost everywhere. But last week, had a little bit of a resurgence. 4 catches, 45 yards, 7 targets. Now, granted, part of that was Chris Olave missing most of the second half. We're still not sure if he's going to clear concussion protocol, but I don't think it really matters too much because even if Chris Olave plays, who else is there? Michael Thomas on IR, Rashid Shaheed looking very unlikely to play. I mean, A.T. Perry's a rookie, Lynn Bowden Jr., Kirkwood. I mean, they don't have a lot of options here. Juwan Johnson is going to have to be involved in this offense, and he gets a very good matchup against Detroit. They haven't been strong against tight ends all year, and this secondary looks terrible lately. Since week 7, they've been one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. We saw Tucker Kraft just scored a touchdown against them last week. Juwan Johnson is going to have to be involved. He's a good pass-catching tight end. That's why we like him in fantasy. He's not a guy that's going to be out there to block. He's going to be out there to catch passes. Even if Chris Olave plays, I think Juwan Johnson is worth the stream, and he's only rostered in 16% of sleeper leagues right now. So if you are desperate at tight end, go take a look at Juwan Johnson. He should still be out there. And also go take a look at all the videos we have to help you win in week 13. We got everything you need, starts it, booms, everything you need to win this week. Check out our week 13 playlist right here.